The medical vessel Hope drifted through the neutral zone between star systems. Its white hull bore the universal symbol of healing, a red cross visible even from distant scanners. Inside, Dr. James worked tirelessly in the emergency ward. The ship carried no weapons, only medical supplies and healing equipment. The Hope served all species without discrimination. Wounded soldiers from both sides of the ongoing galactic conflict found treatment here. The ship's captain, Maria, had maintained this neutrality for 5 years. Even the most aggressive alien races respected the hospital vessels. It was an unspoken law of civilized warfare. You never attack those who heal. Commander Rex of the Krull Empire watched the hospital ship from his battlecruiser's bridge. His scaled fingers tapped against his command chair. The Krull were losing their war against the human colonies. His superiors had given him desperate orders: destroy human morale by any means necessary. "Sir, that's a medical vessel," his lieutenant warned. "The Galactic Council forbids." "The Council is weak," Rex interrupted. "Humans use these ships to heal their soldiers and send them back to fight. It's a military target." The Hope's sensors detected the Krull battlecruiser changing course. Captain Maria frowned at the readings. "They're heading straight for us." Open communication channels. "Krull vessel, this is the hospital ship Hope. We are a neutral medical facility. Please state your intentions." No response came. Instead, the Krull ship's weapons powered up. Dr. James looked up from surgery as alarms began screaming. "What's happening?" "They're targeting us," Maria's voice echoed through the intercom. "All hands, prepare for impact." The first plasma bolt struck the Hope's engine section. The ship lurched violently. Medical equipment crashed to the floor. Patients screamed in their beds. The second strike tore through the hull near the pediatric ward. "They're attacking a hospital ship." A nurse cried out in disbelief. James rushed to the windows and saw escape pods launching from the Hope. Some made it clear. Others were destroyed by Krull fighters. He watched in horror as an escape pod marked with children's ward symbols exploded in a ball of fire. The Hope's distress signal reached every human vessel within 1,000 light years. The message was simple but devastating. Medical vessel under attack. Patients aboard, including children. Send help. On the human colony of New Earth, Admiral Chun received the transmission. His coffee mug shattered against the floor. Around him, his officers stood frozen in shock. "They attacked a hospital ship?" Someone whispered. "Confirm the signal," Chun ordered, though his voice shook with rage. "Confirmed, sir. The Hope is taking heavy fire. They have 300 patients aboard. 50 of them are children from various species." The Admiral's face hardened into stone. "Send word to every human ship in the fleet. Send word to the colonies. Send word to Earth itself." "What should the message say, sir?" "Tell them the Krull Empire has broken the most sacred law of war. Tell them they attacked our healers. Tell them they murdered our children." Chun's voice grew deadly quiet. "And tell them humanity will answer." Within hours, the news spread across human space like wildfire. Mining vessels stopped their work. Cargo ships changed course. Military vessels from rival human factions ceased their squabbles. Even the old Earth fleet, which hadn't left the home system in decades, began powering up their engines. The Krull had made a fatal error. They thought attacking a hospital ship would break human spirits. They thought humanity would cower in fear. They forgot that humans had a saying from their ancient wars: "You can attack our soldiers. You can attack our cities. But when you attack our innocence, you awaken something terrible." Back on the dying Hope, Dr. James helped the last patients into escape pods. The ship was breaking apart around them. Captain Maria stayed at her post, broadcasting the ship's medical logs and patient records. Evidence of the war crime committed here. As James's escape pod launched, he looked back at the Hope one last time. The white vessel, humanity's symbol of mercy and compassion, burned against the darkness of space that the Crawl had targeted humanity's compassion. They would receive humanity's fury. 3 days passed since the Hope's destruction. Commander Rex celebrated his victory in the Crawl military station, orbiting their colony world of Tharak. He expected medals and promotion for his decisive action against the humans. "You eliminated a strategic asset," he told his assembled officers. "Without their medical ships, human forces will crumble." His lieutenant entered the war room, his scales pale with fear. "Commander, we're detecting unusual activity in human space." "Their fleets are retreating?" Rex asked confidently. "No, sir. They single quotes gathering. All of them." On the main display, dozens of red dots appeared, then hundreds, then thousands. Every human vessel with a working engine was moving toward Crawl space. The lieutenant's voice trembled. "Sir, these aren't just military ships. We're seeing cargo haulers, mining vessels, private yachts, even museum ships from Earth. They're all coming." Rex studied the display. Impossible. Civilians wouldn't dare enter a war zone. Meanwhile, in the human staging area near the border, Admiral Chun stood before the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Ships of every size and class filled the void. Some were centuries old, pulled from scrapyards in museums. Others were fresh from the shipyards. A cargo captain named Tom approached Chun. His ship, the Rust Bucket, was never meant for war. "Admiral, my ship has no weapons. But I was there when the Hope helped my daughter after a mining accident. Those doctors saved her life. Tell me what you need." Chun looked at the determination in the civilian's eyes. "Can your ship carry missiles?" "I can carry anything you need, sir." Across the fleet, similar conversations took place. Mining ships volunteered to become ramming vessels. Transport ships offered to carry assault troops. Even small personal craft joined, their pilots ready to die for vengeance. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. The speaker, a tall insectoid from a neutral species, addressed the assembly. "The humans are mobilizing everything. This is unprecedented. We must intervene." The Crawl ambassador stood defiantly. "We destroyed a military asset disguised as a medical ship. We broke no laws." The human ambassador, Sarah, rose slowly. Her voice carried across the chamber with deadly calm. "You attacked a vessel carrying children. You destroyed escape pods marked with medical symbols. You murdered healers who had taken oaths to harm none. Your emotions cloud your judgment," the Crawl ambassador sneered. "This is war." Sarah's eyes burned with fury. "No, this was war. What comes next is extermination." The council erupted in chaos. Several species ambassadors tried to calm the situation, but Sarah had already walked out. The time for diplomacy had passed. In Earth's orbit, something awakened that hadn't moved in 300 years. The ancient dreadnought Vengeance powered up its fusion reactors. This ship was from humanity's darkest era, when they fought each other with weapons so terrible they swore to never use them. Again, Captain Anderson stood on the Vengeance's bridge. He was one of the few who knew what his ship carried. Navigation set course for the Crawl Empire. "Sir, should we wait for the main fleet?" "No, we're the vanguard. It's time the galaxy remembers why humanity sealed away ships like ours." Back at Tharak, Commander Rex received intelligence reports. His confidence began to crack. "How many human ships are coming?" "We've stopped counting at 10,000, sir." "But that's not the worst part. What could be worse?" "They're broadcasting a message on all frequencies. The same message, over and over." Rex listened to the transmission. A human voice, calm and terrifying, spoke. "You touched our healers. You killed our innocent. No mercy. No surrender. No escape. The first human scouts arrived at the edge of crawl space. They didn't attack. They simply watched and transmitted data back to the main fleet. The Crawl Defense Forces prepared for a traditional battle formations, tactics, strategic positions. They didn't understand. This wouldn't be a battle. It would be a reckoning. Dr. James, one of the Hope's survivors, watched from a rescue station as the human fleet grew larger each hour. Part of him, the part that had sworn to do no harm, felt sick at what was coming. But another part, the human part that had watched children die in burning escape pods, felt something else entirely. Justice was coming, and it would arrive with the full fury of a species that had learned to be peaceful by choice, not by nature. The Crawl had reminded humanity what they truly were beneath the civilization and mercy. They were the species that other species fear in their nightmares. And nightmares were coming to Crawl space. Asterisk. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Crawl system like a plague of metal locusts. Commander Rex watched his tactical display in growing horror. The humans hadn't formed traditional battle lines. Instead, they came from every direction at once. Admiral Chan's voice broadcast across all frequencies. Crawl Empire, you have committed an unforgivable crime. Surrender now, and we will show mercy to your civilians. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why the galaxy once called us the Death World species. Rex snarled at his communications officer. Tell them the Crawl never surrender. The first wave wasn't military ships. It was the civilians. Tom's cargo ship, the Rust Bucket, accelerated toward a Crawl defense platform. Its hull had been packed with mining explosives. Tom's last transmission was simple. For the children on the Hope. The explosion tore the platform in half. Across the battlefield, dozens of civilian ships made similar sacrifices. They weren't trained for war, but they knew how to die for something greater. The Crawl forces, trained for conventional warfare, couldn't adapt to the chaos. Mining ships used their industrial lasers to cut through hull armor. Transport vessels deployed boarding pods filled with volunteers armed with whatever weapons they could find. Then the military arrived. Captain Anderson brought the Vengeance into the heart of the Crawl fleet. The ancient dreadnought's weapons were from an era when humanity fought wars of extermination. Antimatter torpedoes, banned for centuries, erupted from its launchers. Sir, those weapons are forbidden by treaty, his weapons officer said quietly. The Crawl voided all treaties when they fired on the Hope, Anderson replied. Fire everything. The center of the Crawl fleet simply ceased to exist. Ships didn't explode. They were unmade at the atomic level. The Vengeance's main gun, a weapon so terrible humans themselves had voted to ban it, charged with a sound like reality screaming. Rex's battlecruiser shook violently. What weapon is that? Unknown, sir. Our shields can't. The sentence never finished. The Vengeance's main gun fired, and a line of pure destruction carved through space. 3 Crawl battleships simply vanished, leaving only glowing particles. But the true horror came from the human infantry. Drop pods rained onto Tharak's surface. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were parents who had lost children, doctors who had lost colleagues, civilians who had lost faith in mercy. Lieutenant Mike led a squad through a Crawl military base. They found a medical facility inside. Mike raised his rifle, then stopped. Inside were wounded Crawl soldiers and their doctors. Sir, one of his soldiers said, they have a hospital. Mike lowered his weapon. We're not them. Mark this building as protected. We fight soldiers, not healers. This distinction spread across the human forces. They annihilated military targets, but protected civilian areas. They destroyed warships, but rescued escape pods. They showed the Crawl what separated justified fury from mindless cruelty. The Galactic Council watched in terrified awe. The human ambassador returned to the chamber, her face calm. You want to know the difference between us and the Crawl? We're destroying their ability to wage war. They destroyed our mercy. But we choose to remember what mercy means, even in our rage. Commander Rex's command station was falling. Human forces had surrounded it. His remaining officers looked to him for orders. Outside, the human fleet had formed a barrier around Tharak. Nothing would escape. But they weren't bombarding civilian cities. Commander, his lieutenant reported, they're offering terms. Admiral Chun appeared on the main screen. Commander Rex, you ordered the attack on the Hope. Surrender yourself, and we'll spare your remaining forces. If I refuse, then we'll take you anyway. But more of your people will die in the process. Rex looked at his officers, saw the fear in their eyes. They were warriors, but they weren't ready for this level of human fury. What will happen to me? You'll stand trial for war crimes. The families of the Hope's victims will bear witness. Justice will be served. The commander's scales drooped in defeat. The Crawl had ruled through strength for generations, but they had never faced a species that turned grief into focused destruction, that channeled fury into precise justice. I surrender, Rex transmitted. Across the system, Crawl forces laid down their weapons. The battle was over in 18 hours. The Crawl Empire's military might, built over centuries, had been systematically dismantled by a species they had awakened from peaceful slumber. But humanity's true victory wasn't in the destruction. It was in what they chose not to destroy. Asterisk. The Galactic Council's grand courtroom had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from every known species filled the observation galleries. At the defendant's stand, Commander Rex stood in restraints, his once proud bearing now diminished. Admiral Chun sat with the prosecution. Beside him were survivors from the Hope, including Dr. James. Their presence was felt throughout the room, living witnesses to an unthinkable crime. The chief judge, an ancient being from the oldest neutral species, spoke gravely. Commander Rex of the Crawl Empire, you stand accused of the destruction of a medical vessel, the murder of medical personnel, and the killing of civilians, including children. How do you plead? Rex's lawyer, provided by the council, stood. Your Honor, my client acted under military orders. The Hope was healing enemy combatants who returned to battle. Dr. James stood suddenly. May I speak, Your Honor? The judge nodded. James pulled out a data pad. I have here the complete patient records from the Hope's final week. 40% of our patients were Crawl soldiers. We saved them just as we saved humans. We even had Commander Rex's own nephew aboard, recovering from battle wounds. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Rex's scales paled. James continued. His nephew was in Escape Pod 7. It was destroyed by Crawl fighters. The courtroom fell silent. Rex hadn't known. His own nephew, killed by his orders. The prosecution presented evidence for 3 days. Video logs from the Hope showed doctors treating patients of all species. They showed the children's ward, where young beings played together regardless of their race. They showed Captain Maria's last moments, staying at her post to transmit evidence. Then came the survivors' testimonies. A nurse named Anna spoke of watching escape pods being destroyed. They weren't military targets. They were marked with medical symbols. Some contained only children and medical staff. A Crawl soldier, who had been a patient on the Hope, also testified. The humans saved my life. Dr. James operated on me for 12 hours. When the attack came, he helped me to an escape pod before helping his own people. I owe my life to human mercy. The defense tried to argue military necessity, cultural differences, the fog of war. Each argument crumbled against the simple truth. They had attacked healers and murdered innocents. On the 4th day, Rex himself took the stand. Do you regret your actions? The prosecutor asked Doc Rex was quiet for a long moment. I regret that my nephew died. I regret that my actions led to my empire's defeat. But do you regret attacking the Hope? I did what I thought was necessary for victory. Dr. James stood again. Your Honor, may I ask the defendant a question? Permission granted. James approached Rex. Commander, if your ship had been damaged, if your crew had been wounded, would you have sought help from a human medical vessel? Rex hesitated. Yes, and you would have expected us to help you? It would have been your duty as healers. Then you knew what we were. You knew what the Hope represented. And you destroyed it anyway. Rex had no answer. The judge called for a recess. When they returned, representatives from multiple species spoke about the precedent this case would set. The hospital ships were sacred. They were what separated civilization from barbarism. Admiral Chun gave the closing statement. We humans have a dark history. We fought terrible wars among ourselves. But we learned. We created rules, laws, conventions to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The hospital ships represent the best of what all our species can be. Healing without discrimination, mercy without borders. He turned to look at Rex. You didn't just attack a ship. You attacked the very idea of civilization. And for that, there must be consequences. The verdict came after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty on all charges. The sentence was unprecedented. Rex would serve life imprisonment, not in a crawl facility, but on a space station where he would work in a hospital helping to heal the wounded from all species. He would spend his remaining years serving the very ideal he had tried to destroy. The Krull Empire was placed under supervision. Their military was limited, their expansion forbidden. But humanity insisted on something else. Medical ships would be stationed in Krull space, teaching their healers, helping their sick. They would learn mercy through example. As Rex was led away, he passed Dr. James. Why? He asked. Why show mercy after what I did? James looked at him with tired eyes. Because that's what separates us from you. We choose to be better, even when we have every reason not to be. The galaxy watched and learned. Humanity's fury had been terrible, but their mercy afterward was even more powerful. Asterisk. 5 years had passed since the Hope incident. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Where the Hope had been destroyed, now floated a massive space station, the Hope Memorial Medical Center. The largest healing facility in known space. Dr. James stood in the station's command center, now wearing the insignia of Chief Medical Coordinator. Through the windows, he could see ships from every species docking at the medical bays. What had begun as humanity's response to tragedy had become something greater. Doctor, the council delegation has arrived. His assistant informed him. James made his way to the conference room where representatives from all major species had gathered. At the head of the table sat Admiral Chun, now retired from military service and serving as humanity's peace ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, Chun began, we're here to sign the Hope Accords into universal law. The document was simple but revolutionary. Every species would contribute to a fleet of neutral medical vessels. These ships would bear a new symbol, a white star on a blue field, surrounded by a circle representing unity. Any attack on these vessels would bring immediate response from all signatory species. The Krull representative, a young female named Vera, stood. The Krull Empire wishes to contribute 30 medical vessels to the fleet. We have learned much in these 5 years. James smiled. Vera had been one of Rex's officers, but she had led the reform movement within Krull society. Their warrior culture hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved. They now sent their best warriors to protect medical ships instead of destroying them. The Insectoid Collective pledges 50 ships, another representative announced. One by one, Each species made their pledge. Even species that had been enemies for generations agreed to work together on this dot in the station's hospital wing. A remarkable scene unfolded. Rex, the former commander, worked alongside human nurses. His life sentence of service had transformed him. His claws, once used for war, now carefully tended to patients. "Commander," a young human child said, not knowing Rex's history, "will you tell me a story?" Rex paused in his work. The child was a patient, recovering from a transport accident. Once, he would have seen her as an enemy. Now, he saw only a child who needed comfort. "I will tell you about redemption," he said softly. The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. As Chun signed for humanity, he spoke. The hope was destroyed trying to save lives. Today, we ensure that no medical vessel will ever stand alone again. An attack on one will be an attack on all. The crawl signed. The collective signed. Even species that had never participated in galactic affairs sent representatives to sign. The document grew with thousands of signatures and marks, each representing a commitment to protect those who heal. But the accords went further than just protection. They established medical training exchanges, shared research facilities, and emergency response protocols that crossed all borders. The Hope incident had done something unprecedented. It had united the galaxy not through force or trade, but through a shared commitment to preserve life. Dr. James later stood in the memorial room of the station. The walls bore the names of everyone who had died on the Hope, human and alien alike. Captain Maria's name stood prominently, along with the words she had spoken in her final transmission. "Healing knows no borders." A young Krull medical student approached him. "Dr. James, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing us that strength isn't just about destruction. My uncle was Rex. What he did brought shame to our family. But you gave us a chance to restore our honor through service." James placed a hand on the student's shoulder. "Your uncle is finding his own redemption. Yesterday, he saved 3 lives during a complicated surgery. That's 3 families who will remember the Krull who helped them, not the one who caused harm." The student's eyes widened with surprise, and something like hope dot as the day ended. James stood on the observation deck. Ships bearing the new medical symbol departed for every corner of the galaxy. Each one carried mixed species crews, trained in the same protocols, bound by the same oath. The Hope had been one ship, destroyed in an act of cruelty. But from its ashes had risen thousands of vessels, protected by the combined might of all civilized species. The galaxy had learned humanity's most important lesson: mercy is not weakness. And those who protect life must themselves be protected. In his cell-turn quarters, Rex looked at the medical certification on his wall, earned through 5 years of study and service. Tomorrow, he would begin training young Krull medical students. His war was long over, but his service to life had just begun. The Hope was gone, but hope itself had multiplied 1,000-fold. And the galaxy was better for it. Asterisk.